110 points. That is the exact brutal deficit separating Max Verstappen from championship leader Kimi Antonelli at the 2026 summer break, a statistical chasm that has officially triggered the performance-linked exit clause in his Red Bull contract. This specific metric is the uncomfortable truth behind Verstappen's winless season, because it confirms that his 0 victories through the first 11 Grands Prix were not just a competitive slump, but the precise contractual condition required to unlock his freedom. The clause was inserted at his cam's request due to long-standing apprehension about the 2026 rules overhaul, and now that he sits roughly 6th in the driver's standings, the escape hatch is wide open. But here is the tension that nobody in the paddock can currently resolve. While the trigger has been pulled, the outcome remains completely opaque, caught between a reported new offer from Red Bull to remove the clause entirely and a public denial from his own father that suggests any such deal is pure fiction. We are staring at an active exit window running through October 2026, yet we have absolutely no confirmation of where he will be when that deadline expires. This uncertainty creates a narrative vacuum that is rapidly filling with contradictory signals. On one side, you have German outlet Bild reporting specifically that Red Bull has tabled a 1-year extension to 2029 with a higher salary and no exit clauses attached. On the other side, you have Jos Verstappen dismissing those exact rumors on X in early August with the blunt statement, "You know absolutely nothing." So which version of reality is actually playing out behind closed doors? Is the team desperately trying to lock down their star driver before he walks away? Or are they negotiating with a ghost while the clock ticks down toward autumn? The answer matters because this isn't just about contract law or salary negotiations. It is about whether the most dominant driver of the modern era is currently racing for a team he no longer believes can win. Through 11 rounds of the 2026 season, Red Bull has failed to secure a single victory, marking their first winless half-season since 2015 when Verstappen was still a teenager at Toro Rosso. That historical context makes the current situation feel less like a temporary dip in form and more like a structural collapse. The sheer scale of this underperformance is what transforms a standard silly season rumor into an existential crisis for the team. When a driver of Verstappen's caliber goes 11 races without standing on the top step of the podium, accumulating only 4 podiums and 109 points in that stretch, it forces everyone to ask whether the problem is the machine or the marriage. His manager Raymond Vermeulen has stated publicly that Max wants to finish his time with Red Bull and has a contract until 2028 and would like to fulfill it, yet Verstappen himself has refused to commit publicly to staying past this year. That gap between the manager's diplomatic optimism and the driver's pointed silence is where the real story lives. It suggests that fulfilling the contract is a preference, not a promise, and that preference is contingent on factors that are currently failing to materialize on track. The exit clause wasn't designed for a scenario where the car is merely second best. It was designed for exactly this moment, where the apprehension about new regulations has materialized into a winless drought so severe that it has activated the very safety net his camp insisted upon years ago. Now that the net has been deployed, the question isn't whether he can leave, but whether anything Red Bull offers in the next 2 months can convince him to stay. The mechanism that activated this crisis is not a vague sense of dissatisfaction, but a hard contractual threshold tied directly to championship position at the mid-season checkpoint. Reports from GP fans and F1 oversteer specify that the condition for triggering the exit clause was finishing the first half of 2026 outside the top 2 of the driver standings, a benchmark Verstappen missed by a significant margin when he sat around 6th at the summer break. This wasn't an accidental oversight in contract drafting. His camp explicitly requested this performance-linked escape route during negotiations because they feared the 2026 power unit and chassis overhaul would produce exactly this kind of competitive reset. They anticipated that Red Bull's transition from Honda to an in-house Ford partnership could go wrong, and they ensured Max had a legal off-ramp if his worst fears materialized. Those fears have now become statistical fact. The 11-race winless streak isn't just bad luck or a development plateau, it is the empirical evidence required to validate a clause that was written years ago as insurance against regulatory uncertainty. What makes this trigger so consequential is that it converts subjective frustration into objective leverage. Before the summer break, Red Bull could argue that the car was improving and that patience would be rewarded. Now, the contract itself says otherwise. The reported exit window runs from the summer break through October 2026, meaning every race between now and then carries dual significance, points for a championship he cannot win, and data points for a decision that will define the next decade of his career. Technical director Pierre Wache has publicly maintained that Red Bull still targets a victory before season's end, but even if they achieve that goal tomorrow, it won't retroactively fix the championship position that already opened the door. The clause doesn't care about moral victories or late-season momentum. It cares about where Verstappen stood when the halfway whistle blew, and he stood nowhere near the top 2. So where does that leave the championship picture right now? Verstappen's 109 points represent less than half of Antonelli's tally, a ratio that underscores how thoroughly the competitive balance has shifted since Red Bull's dominant 2021 to 2025 run. This isn't a team fighting for second place. This is a team fighting to remain relevant to their own star driver. The exit clause was designed for a scenario where Red Bull fell off the pace dramatically, and that scenario has arrived with mathematical precision. Whether Max ultimately uses the clause or renegotiates around it, the fact that it exists in active status changes everything about how the remainder of 2026 will be interpreted. Every radio message, every setup change, every strategy call now happens under the shadow of a deadline that was set in motion the moment he crossed the line outside the top two at the midpoint of this winless season. Cars fail, contracts activate, leverage shifts. The sheer scale of Antonelli's advantage means that even a perfect second half for Verstappen would likely only move him from 6th to 3rd or 4th, leaving the original trigger condition permanently unmet in reverse. That permanence is what makes October such a hard deadline rather than a soft target. Red Bull cannot earn back the championship position required to void the clause, so they must instead convince Verstappen to waive it voluntarily. That requires offering something more valuable than the points they can no longer deliver. It requires proving that the car's fundamental issues are solvable within a time frame that aligns with his career ambitions, not just their contractual obligations. Until that proof arrives, the 110-point gap remains both a historical statistic and an active legal instrument, one that transformed a disappointing half-season into a potential departure notice the moment the summer break began. The legal leverage only exists because the RB22 has failed catastrophically on track. Verstappen has documented this failure in real time with damning radio messages. He explicitly told his engineers that the car is completely undriveable during races. He added that they have never had anything this bad with everything together. That specific phrase signals this is not about one misconfigured setup. It is an indictment of the entire package as a cohesive system. When a champion uses that word, he is providing technical feedback. The behavior falls outside the operational window required to extract performance. This is fundamental mechanical inadequacy that no driver talent can fix. Verstappen explained that they do not have tire degradation issues. They actually have car degradation instead. Tire wear is predictable and manageable through pace control. Car degradation is chaotic and shifts from corner to corner unpredictably. He noted that balance problems are one thing entirely, but changes happening every lap make it very complicated. This unpredictability is why he described every lap as survival. He stated on radio that he cannot even put a reference in. He cannot push at all because the car does not let him. Survival driving is damage limitation performed at extreme speeds. The primary objective shifts from attacking rivals to maintaining stability. Balance shifts constantly. Grip vanishes suddenly, confidence erodes quickly. The psychological toll compounds the mechanical deficit significantly. Drivers lose dust precisely when they need it most. Verstappen stated he has not enjoyed this car since lap 1. This tells us the development curve is not trending upward. Rob Smedley validated this assessment during mid-season television coverage. The former Ferrari engineer rated Red Bull a mere 5 out of 10. He observed there is a different problem every single weekend. Issues are mutating rather than repeating for targeted fixes. The platform lacks robustness for the new formula sensitivity. How does a driver maintain output when the tool works against him? The Hungarian Grand Prix offers the clearest case study. Verstappen recovered from 6th to finish 2nd despite rear wing failures. He warned the team it was becoming dangerous for himself. That result demonstrates his ability to maximize a flawed package. Second place achieved through survival is still not victory. Your best outcome requires extracting impossible performance levels. One safety car can erase that hard-won podium instantly. Through 11 races, this pattern has repeated constantly. Talent alone cannot overcome a fundamentally broken machine. The standings reflect this harsh reality perfectly. Radio messages reveal the gap between expectation and actual performance. Remember how this all started? That 100-point deficit triggering the exit clause by dropping Verstappen to 6th? That same statistical trigger is now colliding directly with a contract negotiation that has descended into public contradiction. German outlet Bild reported specifically that Red Bull offered a 1-year extension through 2029, complete with a higher salary and no exit clauses attached. If true, it would represent a desperate attempt to close the escape hatch before October arrives. But Jos Verstappen dismantled that narrative on X in early August with 5 words: "You know absolutely nothing." He posted this response directly to speculation about Red Bull wanting to remove Max's exit clause, turning what should have been private negotiations into a public dispute over basic facts. This contradiction matters because it leaves the exit window officially open through October 2026 without any confirmed resolution. We cannot treat the Bild report as settled truth when the driver's own father has explicitly denied its accuracy. Nor can we dismiss it entirely as fabrication, since GPF fans relayed the claims citing sources within the team. What we have instead is an unresolved tension between two competing versions of reality, both emerging from credible channels yet fundamentally incompatible. The practical consequence is that every day between now and October carries heightened uncertainty. Red Bull may be negotiating in good faith, or they may be posturing for leverage while preparing contingency plans. Verstappen's camp may be genuinely committed to staying, or they may be using the denial as tactical pressure to extract better terms elsewhere. Reports deny certainty. Deadlines approach relentlessly. Negotiations remain opaque. Sky Sports News has added another layer by reporting that Verstappen's camp initiated contact with McLaren, though no team has confirmed any deal. ESPN frames this as classic silly season speculation, cautioning that no concrete signing exists anywhere. Yet the combination of an active exit clause, a public denial from Joes, and verified outreach to competitors creates a scenario where inaction itself becomes a strategic choice. Every week that passes without a signed extension strengthens Verstappen's hand while weakening Red Bull's ability to plan for 2027. Technical director Pierre Wache can target a victory before season's end, but even achieving that goal won't retroactively address the contractual instability that now defines their relationship. The uncomfortable position Red Bull occupies is that they must convince Verstappen to waive a clause he earned through performance failure, while simultaneously proving the car can deliver the wins that triggered it in the first place. Joss's dismissal of the build report suggests either that no such offer exists, or that its terms were so unacceptable that acknowledging them publicly would undermine future negotiations. Either interpretation points toward the same conclusion: the exit window remains functional, the deadline remains firm, and the resolution remains entirely dependent on developments that haven't happened yet. Until something changes between now and October, the 110-point gap that opened this door continues to define everything that happens next.